Jose. Yes.
If only they knew. Not every smile hides love. Some hide secrets.
He's so handsome.
If only he looked my way.
Every woman dreams of being his wife.
If only these women knew what really goes on inside this mansion. They won't be chasing his smile or wishing to be his wife. Handsome, rich, powerful, oh yes. But what lies behind those doors would freeze their hearts if they only knew.
Now, let's dive into the story. They said in Lagos, money built walls so high, not even whispers could climb them. Behind those gates lived a man so rich, people swore he used money as tissue paper. His name was Ademola. To the world, he was power, prestige, untouchable wealth. But inside his mansion was a secret no bride ever escaped. They said that in the heart of Lagos, wealth had a face, and its name was Ademola. From the gilded gates of his estate, people would stand in awe. Iron bars rose like fortress walls, crowned with golden crests. The mansion behind them loomed so vast. Children whispered it was a palace stolen from heaven. Chandeliers burned all night, yet no laughter spilled from the windows. Servants came at dawn and were gone before dusk, leaving the house as silent as a graveyard. And that was the first mystery of Ademola. Why did no one sleep under his roof but him? He was a man women prayed for, men envied, and families boasted about knowing. With his baritone voice and his carved jawline, he looked every inch a king. His garage glittered with exotic cars. He owned hotels, nightclubs, and shopping plazas across the state. The wealth was endless. But unlike the other young men of money, Ademola never lingered at parties, never danced under flashing lights, never let anyone too close. He kept his distance, smiling politely but retreating quickly. The city talked. They said, Ademola has everything but lives with shadows. And maybe they were right. Because in that mansion was a door no servant dared approach, a door Ademola alone carried the key to. At night, he would disappear behind it. Hours would pass, and when he returned, his eyes were darker, his shoulders heavier, but nobody asked questions. Why? Because in Lagos, money spoke louder than suspicion. Still, behind the glamour and cars, Ademola carried a hunger. Not the hunger of food, nor the hunger for women's company, though they threw themselves at him like moths to fire. No, his hunger was for something else. Something that even his staff felt but never named. Something that made them leave before sunset, muttering prayers under their breath. And yet, the village girls dreamed. They dreamed of being chosen by him, of living in silks and riding in his cars. To them, the stories of his loneliness were romantic, even thrilling. They believed they could be the one to warm his cold nights. When the time came, Ademola did not marry a girl from the city. He turned his gaze far to a village whose name was barely known, a place where poverty gnawed at families, where girls dreamed of a savior more than a husband. And there, his eyes fell on Halima. She was only 19, with the freshness of youth and the simplicity of village life still in her eyes. Her parents were peasant farmers, bent by hardship but softened by humility. To them, Ademola was not just a man. He was a miracle. He showered them with money they had never touched before. He built them a house, gave her father a new business, and filled their hands with gifts until they could not refuse. And so Halima was given to him, too quickly, too easily. No questions, no caution. The wedding was a spectacle. Villagers danced, women ululated, and children clapped. To them, Halima had caught the golden fish every other girl longed for. They did not know she had walked into a story that was not hers to write. That night, Ademola's mansion welcomed its first bride. The chandeliers glowed brighter, the servants bowed lower, and the city whispered that Lagos's richest bachelor was no longer alone, but the door, the dark door at the end of the hall, remained locked. And within months, tragedy struck. Halima, heavy with child, went to bed with dreams of motherhood. By dawn, she was gone. No scream, no struggle, just silence. The girl who once carried laughter in her eyes was lowered into the soil at the back of the mansion. People wept, but not too loudly. Ademola's tears flowed too, but they dried quickly, and life moved on. One wife gone, one grave behind the mansion, and one door still locked. The story was just beginning. The year after Halima's grave grew grass, Ademola returned to the villages. This time, farther than before, as though distance could wash away whispers. In a quiet hamlet near Benue, he found Amara. She was 19 too, but unlike Halima, she carried not just beauty, but a fire. Her eyes were sharp, her voice steady. Orphaned young, she lived under the roof of an uncle who treated her less like family and more like burden. Every evening she hawked water by the roadside, her tray heavy, her feet dusty, her dreams always just beyond reach. Ademola appeared one evening, his car black and gleaming under the setting sun. When he stepped out, even the dust seemed to pause. He did not bargain or plead. He simply spoke, and money followed. In a single week, Amara's uncle owned land, wore agbada, and spoke like a man reborn. And Amara? Her uncle did not ask if she was ready. He didn't ask if she loved. He only said, "This is your chance. Do not waste it." And so, the girl who once dreamed of university became a bride. Her wedding to Ademola was louder than Halima's. There were drums, goats slaughtered, neighbors feasting for days. To the villagers, Amara had been rescued, saved, chosen by fortune. They cheered as she left in the back of his car, waving like a queen ascending her throne. But queens deserve courts, and Amara's new palace was silent. The mansion received her with gold and marble, but no voices, no children's laughter, no warmth. By 6 in the evening, the staff vanished, and the house became hers, and hers alone, except, of course, for Ademola. At first, he was kind. He gave her jewelry, clothes finer than she had ever seen. He made sure her tray of water was forgotten, her hands no longer calloused. She ate from silver. She was carried in cars instead of walking dusty roads, and she told herself, maybe this is love. But love has warmth. Ademola had rules. Never ask me where I go at night. Never touch the door at the end of the hall. Never Amara. Never question why. And she obeyed, because obedience meant peace. Yet, as moons turned, peace slipped away. Amara found herself watching, listening. She noticed how every evening the same pattern repeated. Ademola excused himself, entered the dark door, and stayed for hours. Sometimes, muffled sounds seeped through, low voices, though no guest was ever seen leaving. Sometimes, the faint scent of burning herbs curled under the door. She asked once, only once. "What do you do there?" Ademola's gaze pinned her. It was not anger, it was warning. "The question," he said quietly, "that could cost you everything." That night, Amara lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her heart uneasy. And then, hope, the swelling of her belly, the soft flutter inside, she was with child. For a moment, the shadows retreated, replaced by joy. Ademola smiled, touched her face, even laughed softly. For weeks, she believed the curse of loneliness had lifted from the mansion. But joy does not last long where secrets dwell. But joy does not last long where secrets dwell. One morning, the servants found her motionless in her bed, her skin pale, her lips still, her unborn child gone with her. The city mourned. Her uncle wailed, but was silenced by the wealth that had filled his pockets. Again, Ademola wept, but his tears dried too quickly. And again, a grave was dug behind the mansion. 2 wives gone, 2 graves hidden by roses, and the door still locked. They said Ademola's mansion swallowed women whole. The gates would open, laughter would echo for a time, and then silence. The kind of silence that clings to walls like dampness. When Ademola went for his 3rd bride, tongues wagged across villages and towns. He chose Zainab. She was unlike the others. 22 years old, graceful, but with eyes that watched everything. She came from a modest family, raised with caution and prayer. And when Ademola's convoy of cars arrived at her father's compound, people whispered, "Another lamb to the slaughter." But Zainab was no lamb. She was a girl who noticed shadows even in daylight. The wedding was as grand as the others before. Golden fabrics wrapped her like royalty. Musicians sang her name. and her family danced until their feet could no longer carry them. Ademola, in his white agbada, smiled faintly. That cold mask he wore so well. He built her parents a fine house, bought her brothers motorbikes, and promised a life of ease. Everyone said she was blessed. Everyone, except Zainab. For in her heart, a thread of unease was already tightening. From the first night in the mansion, she knew something was wrong. The air inside the walls felt too heavy, too rehearsed, like a stage set for a play she hadn't been given the script for. The staff bowed, silent as ghosts. At exactly 6 in the evening, they vanished out the door, past the gates. And then, just like that, Zainab and Ademola were alone in the sprawling palace, alone with the forbidden silence. She noticed his patterns. Every night, just before midnight, Ademola would disappear down the corridor to that locked door. He carried with him a single key, always kept close, even while he slept. He would vanish inside for hours, and when he returned, his face glistened with sweat, his eyes too bright, his hands trembling ever so slightly before he poured himself a glass of water. "Why don't you allow the staff to stay overnight?" she asked once, her voice calm, hiding the suspicion beneath. Ademola's eyes slid to hers, cold and unreadable. "Because this house belongs to me, and I like my peace. But it wasn't peace, it was something else, something darker." Zainab began to test him. She asked about the room. He ignored her. She asked again. His gaze hardened. So she learned to be quiet, to smile when required, to move like a shadow through her own home. But every night she listened. The muffled sounds behind the door. Low chants. Whispers like wind through bones. Sometimes a woman's sob carried through the cracks. One evening, she followed at a distance. She watched him slip inside. For a moment, the door wasn't shut properly, and light leaked out, a red glow that flickered like fire, but wasn't fire. Her breath caught. She almost stepped forward, almost peered inside, but Ademola turned suddenly, slamming the door shut with a force that shook the corridor. Zainab fled before he could see her. That night, lying awake, her pulse racing, she whispered into the darkness, "What are you hiding, Ademola?" The next morning, she began her plan. She watched the way he handled the key, the way it never left his pocket. She studied the shape of it, committing every curve to memory. If she was to uncover the truth, she would need to be clever. For unlike Halima and Amara, Zainab was not content to live as a queen in a golden cage. She was determined to know the secret of the forbidden door. And secrets, when forced into light, do not come quietly. There is a saying in her village, "A locked door hides more than silence." For weeks, Zainab carried those words like a stone in her chest. The forbidden room called to her, louder each night. Ademola's life was as precise as a clock. He woke at dawn, bathed in silence, ate without speaking much. By day, he was the perfect husband, generous, calm, even affectionate in calculated measures. But by night, he changed. His eyes grew restless, his hands twitched, and when the clock struck midnight, he would vanish into the corridor with the key. Always the key. Zainab had memorized its shape, the jagged edge, the curve of its handle. One evening, as he showered, she moved quickly. With a piece of soap, she pressed the impression of the key into wax. Her heart thundered so loud, she feared he would hear it over the water. She slipped the key back just as the shower stopped. That night, she barely slept. The wax impression burned in her pocket like fire. The next day, while Ademola met with business associates, Zainab traveled to a locksmith in the market, far from prying eyes. By dusk, she had it, a duplicate. She hid it in her wrapper, close to her skin, and walked home with trembling hands. She told no one, not even Mama Keiji, who had become like a mother to her. That night, the silence was unbearable. Ademola entered the room as usual. She waited until his shadow disappeared behind the door, until the muffled chants began. Then, barefoot and shaking, she crept down the hall. The key slid into the lock with a soft click. For a moment, Zainab froze, her breath shallow. Then she turned it, slowly, carefully. The door creaked open. What she saw froze the blood in her veins. Inside, the air was thick with incense and something darker, something that smelled of earth and rot. Candles flickered against the walls, casting red and gold shadows. At the center of the room lay 6 beds draped in white cloths. Upon each bed, women, pregnant women, their faces pale, eyes closed. They did not stir. Zainab's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a scream, and then she saw him, Ademola, kneeling before a carved idol, chanting in a language older than memory. His white agbada was soaked with sweat. He rose, his hands slick with something red, and as if the gods had whispered, he turned, eyes locking on Zainab. For a moment, neither moved. The air itself seemed to pause. Then, his voice, low, thunderous, "You shouldn't be here." Zainab stumbled back, nearly tripping over the threshold. Her mind screamed, "Run!" But her feet dragged against the weight of horror. Ademola advanced slowly, each step deliberate, his gaze unblinking. "You've seen what no one should see. Do you know what this means?" Her voice cracked. They're dead. Those women. His lips curved into something between a smile and a snarl. Not dead. Not alive. They are mine. My offering. Zainab's knees weakened. Her stomach churned, but her spirit hardened. "You're a monster," she whispered. His laughter filled the room, chilling, hollow. "No, I am a survivor, and you are next." She bolted. Her wrapper snagged on the doorway, tearing as she sprinted down the hall. Behind her, Ademola's footsteps thundered. The mansion seemed endless, its shadows closing in. She reached her room, slammed the door, and pushed the dresser against it. Her chest heaved as she clutched the duplicate key. The cursed key that had revealed the truth. For hours she sat trembling in the dark, listening. The footsteps stopped. The chanting resumed, and she knew then Ademola would not forgive her curiosity. The forbidden door was no longer just a mystery. It was a death sentence. The mansion no longer felt like a home. It was a prison. Each creak in the hall, each flicker of the candlelight told Zainab that death walked with her. For days, she lived like a shadow, eating little, sleeping even less, her mind consumed by the images behind that forbidden door, the pale faces, the swollen bellies, the god her husband bowed to. But she was not broken. Fear had not erased her will to live, and so she began to plan. One evening, as the sky cracked open with thunder, Mama KG slipped quietly into Zainab's room. She closed the door and pressed her wrinkled hand against Zainab's trembling fingers. "My daughter," she whispered, her eyes heavy with sorrow. "I have served this house too long not to know its secrets. You are not the first bride. You may not be the last unless you act." Tears stung Zainab's eyes. "He will kill me if I try." Mama KG shook her head firmly. "Not if you strike first. Evil thrives in silence, but it falls when the world hears the truth." That night, with thunder booming above the mansion, Zainab clutched her phone. She waited until Ademola disappeared into the forbidden room, his chanting rising like smoke through the cracks. Then she crept down the corridor once more. Her hands shook, but this time, instead of the key, she held her phone. Through the door's narrow gap, the camera caught everything. The beds, the bodies, Ademola kneeling before the idol, muttering incantations. She pressed record until her phone felt like it burned her palm. Then she fled back to her room, her chest hammering. The next morning, Ademola sat at the breakfast table, his expression as cold as always. "You were restless last night," he said quietly. Zainab froze, her spoon hovering. "Did you see something again?" His voice sharpened, a blade wrapped in silk. Her lips parted, but no words came. He leaned forward, eyes dark as storms. "If you betray me, Zainab, not even your God will save you." That was the moment she knew. There was no more waiting. Tonight, it would end. The storm outside matched the storm within. Zainab slipped away at dusk, her phone clutched tight. She sent the video to Amaka with a single line: "If anything happens to me, show this to the world." Then she returned to the mansion. Ademola was waiting, not in his chair but standing, tall, terrifying. His smile was calm, but his eyes betrayed fury. "You disappoint me," he said softly. "I gave you everything, and still you pry." Zainab steadied herself. "You gave me a cage. You gave me nightmares." He laughed, low and chilling. "Do you know what I am, Zainab? I am not just a man. I am the price of power. Without me, this city would crumble. Without you," she whispered back, "innocent women would still be alive." Something flickered in his gaze. Rage, fear, maybe both. Before he could move, the sound of engines roared outside. Police, neighbors, journalists. Amaka had done it. She had released the video. The doors burst open. Flashlights swept across the mansion. Officers stormed in. Ademola whirled towards Zainab, betrayal written on his face. "You!" But his words were drowned by shouts. He fought like a cornered beast, roaring that they could never take him. Yet in that moment, his power crumbled. His secrets were no longer hidden in shadows. The world had seen. They dragged him out in chains. Zainab stood in the center of the grand hall, trembling, her wrapper torn, her face streaked with tears. Mama KG wrapped her arms around her. And as Ademola was shoved into the waiting van, the thunder rolled, and for the first time in years, the mansion exhaled. Days later, the headlines were everywhere. Billionaire ritualist exposed. Wives mystery. Deaths solved. At the police station, Ademola confessed. His voice was hollow, stripped of pride. I sought wealth through blood. The native doctor told me I had only 5 years. But with every pregnant wife sacrificed, I gained more. Now the years are up. The spirits will collect their due, and he was right. On the 7th night in prison, Ademola was found lifeless. His stomach bloated like the women he betrayed, red liquid streaming from his eyes and nose. The city fell silent. Fear rippled through Lagos. Parents warned their daughters. Pastors preached about the dangers of greed. And Zainab, scarred but alive, carried the story in her soul. The moral lesson of this story is simple. All that glitters is not gold. Wealth built in darkness can only end in destruction. Before giving your life or your daughter's hand in marriage, seek the truth. Ask questions. Pray for discernment. Evil often wears a handsome face and speaks with a gentle voice, but nothing hides from the eyes of God. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more African tales that inspire, captivate, and reveal the hidden truths of life. I'll be back with another unforgettable story. Until then, stay blessed.